Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Debbie Choi. Let me just check that everyone can hear me in the comment section before I keep talking. Can somebody put in the comment whether they can hear me or not? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for joining us. We are very excited to have you here today. This is part 3 of our GMAT Club live streaming series on the Stanford application. And I'm a GSB alum, and I am very excited to cover today the Stanford interview. So let me dive in. We have a lot to cover. We had the last couple of weeks we had talked about an overview of the Stanford itself, and also last week we dove really deep into the application and the essays. So if you missed those episodes, they are on YouTube, and I think we have the links in the comment section. So take a look at those. Today, we're going to be talking about interviews. I know it's early yet, but it's never too early to get prepared. So we'll do a deep dive into how to think about interviews, how to get prepped. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, and can folks see my screen? If you would just give me an indication in the comment section before I carry on. All right, thank you. Great. So let's dive in. Just to introduce myself, I grew up in Singapore, and I went to college in the US. I went to a small liberal arts college in upstate New York, and majored in international studies and minored in econ. So for folks who are wondering, do I have to be a business major, or do I have to go to an well-known Ivy League university in order to get into Stanford? The answer is no. They are looking for absolutely everyone who is a top performer, smart folks, and all sorts of backgrounds as well. Pre-MBA, I was working in finance and management consulting. So I started off at JP Morgan on the buy side, so not investment banking. So again, another common question, do I have to be a banker? Do I have to be in investment banking to get into business school? And the answer is no. And then actually after that, I switched into management consulting before business school. Post business school, I focused on product management in the healthcare sector, worked for both Fortune 500 and startups. And so that's a little bit about my background. What we're going to be covering today is we're going to give you an overview of the Stanford GSB interview process. We're going to talk about how to start your prep and go through some sample interview questions and give you an idea for what they're looking for when they're asking you certain questions. And then we're going to tell you a little bit about MBA mission and open it up to Q&A. If you have any questions for me, please put them in the comments box on the right. And you can put them in anytime. I will look at them when I open up the Q&A towards the end of the session, and I will go through the questions in the comment box. Okay, so that's the agenda for today. So let's dive in. All right, so the GSB interview process is school initiated and is by invite only, and there are some schools where you can schedule an interview yourself. It's initiated by the candidate, but for Stanford, it is you're chosen to apply. You're invited to interview. Not chosen to apply. I'm sorry. Chosen to interview. And of course, you have to submit an application in order to be invited to interview. And the interview process, unlike a job interview, it is just one data point that the schools consider. And this applies to not just Stanford, but most of the other US business schools as well. So After the interview, what happens is the interviewer will write up a report that gets sent to Stanford, and that gets included in your file, and they will review your file again holistically, with the interviews being one data point of your application. So it's not the final hurdle, it's not the final gatekeeper. And if you impress the interviewer, it doesn't mean that your offer is assured. It just means that you did well for that part of the process, and your file will be reviewed again holistically. The number of people who are invited to interview is quite low for Stanford. Only about 20% of applicants actually get invited to interview. You can imagine, for some schools, the acceptance rate is 20%. So it's already an achievement in and of itself to be invited to interview with Stanford. So that's an overview of what the process is like. Who will be interviewing you? Typically, they try to get alumni interviewers to match up by industry with you. Of course, the alumni interviewers are trained. There's sometimes less consistency in terms of the training. Some interviewers, some alumni have been doing it for many years. Other alumni may be new to the process. But I do believe that Stanford does a pretty good job of training its interviewers to try to ensure some consistency. Of course, for every interview, whether you're interviewing with an alumni or admissions officer, it's very much dependent on personality. Each interviewer has a little bit of leeway in terms of probing into certain aspects of your application or your candidacy, I should say, or not. So I think the interview is very much a interpersonal dynamic. They are looking at whether you will really fit into the culture of the school. And alumni are really, they have a great sense for, what the culture is, what the school is looking for ultimately. And that's why Stanford relies a lot on alumni interviewers. In terms of what that means for you, is that when you ask the alumni interviewer questions about the school at the end of the interview, usually they'll open it up to you to say, do you have any questions for me? Keep in mind that the alumni interviewer may not know what is happening on campus, the latest and greatest that's happening on campus. They can certainly talk about their experience when they were there, and it may be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And they can definitely talk about the strength of the alumni network and what that experience is like for them as an alum. But certainly don't expect them to know kind of the latest and greatest of what's happening on campus right at that time. So that's typically what you can expect from alumni interviewers for the GSB. The interview format itself is a blind interview format. So there are two common types of format with the U.S. business schools. One is the blind interview, which means that the interviewer has no knowledge of your application beforehand. They may or may not have seen your resume beforehand. In my experience, usually the interviewer will ask for your resume to be sent to them before the interview. So they may have just reviewed your resume. They may have it in front of them during the interview. Certainly bring in a couple of copies of your resume to the interview just in case. And this is, of course, talking about in-person interviews. But certainly, have the expectation that your interviewer may not have read your essays. Or may not know that much about you beyond what's on your resume. So they may not have your GMAT score, they may not have your GPA in hand, certainly not your academic transcripts. I don't think it's necessary to bring your academic transcripts or your GMAT score reports to the interview. You can if you want to. I don't, in my experience, I've never heard of any interviewers asking for those reports, but certainly, know what your scores are, know what your weaknesses are in terms of your college transcripts, your college performance. There are going to be some sample open-ended questions, and we'll go through some specific question types later in this presentation, but some open-ended questions that you can expect could include what type of leadership role do you typically take on a team. So these are more kind of the example. They're looking for examples of leadership roles and more open-ended questions. Okay. All right. So how do you start your prep now that you know what that interview format is going to be like? So remember, the interviews are not meant to stress you out. They're not meant to trick you, not meant to, kind of see, it's really not a trick situation, or it's, not meant to really stress you out that much. Of course, it's going to be stressful just meeting someone for the first time, not knowing what questions they have of you. But certainly the goal that they have is to get to know you. So really think about letting your real personality shine through. If you have a wicked sense of humor, no harm in sharing a little bit of that. Of course, you don't want that to take over and be appropriate, certainly, but be yourself and show them who you are. Show them how interesting you are, how much fun you are, how dynamic you are, and that they really want to get to know you and different sides of you. Of course, very important to build rapport. It's ultimately it's an interaction between two human beings, and there's a lot of nonverbal dynamics, chemistries, and so on. You want to build rapport as much as you can. If you walk out of that interview thinking to yourself, "Wow, I really enjoyed that conversation. I wish we had more time to keep talking. I enjoyed meeting that alumni, talking with him or her." That would hopefully be mutually felt as well, and that's really half the battle. Is that that clicking, the human connection, that dynamic, because ultimately they are looking for that. And we have a quote here from actually an admissions director at HBS, but it applies to Stanford and all the other schools as well. Once you get to that interview stage, the decision is no longer about whether you're qualified or whether you're smart enough. They already know you are. That's why only 20% of people get invited to interview at Stanford. Now it's about selection. Give them a reason to take you. And the only way they can know whether to select you or not is by getting to know you, the real you, the authentic you, not kind of the robot or over-rehearsed or canned version of you, but really you with your perfections, imperfections, quirks, everything. And I think that's really what they're trying to do in this interview. And of course, ultimately, keep in mind that it's one data point. It's not going to make or break your application. It's an important data point, but nevertheless, it is reviewed holistically as part of your application. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some reassurance. And of course, you want to know your story very well. You want to be confident as to how to answer questions, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Some sample questions. We have a lot of resources on our website. A lot of interview guides that are tailored for each school, and we also have more sample questions in each school's interview. And these are questions based on feedback from past clients as to what they were asked. So definitely take a look at our school-specific interview guides on our website, and when it comes time to prepare for the actual interview. Okay, so more specifically, how do you prepare? Think about these three big questions, and if you can convey these three main points to the interviewer, you're going to be in really good shape. the first thing that they're really asking themselves when they walk into the interview is, are you likable? Are you somebody who, the rest of the class would enjoy sitting beside in a classroom discussion, or going to a networking event? Are you likable? The second question is, are you who you say you are on paper? We've all, schools have seen plenty of folks who are super impressive, perfect on paper, but perhaps once they meet that candidate, they find that there's more to what they appear on paper. So really, they are a lot of the probing questions, a lot of digging in to clarify or ask you more about your stories. That's really for them to assess, are you who you say you are on paper? And then, of course, the third thing they're assessing is, are you excited about the program? So really, if nothing else that you take away from today's presentation, I hope that you can take away that the interviewer is trying to answer these three big questions when they walk into the interview, of trying to figure that out from the interview from you. Okay. So what you can do to get ready to answer these three questions that the interviewer is looking for: first of all, know your story very well, reread your essays and your resume, know every single bullet point on your resume. Think about, try to remember the details behind each bullet point. There may be some things that you did in college a few years ago, right? Or that you may not exactly remember the details. So this, as you prepare, you want to get to know or try to remember the details. You do not want to be trying to remember the details during the interview. So this is the prep work that will help you sound more confident, because you already thought through, okay, yeah, this is what happened, who did that and who did what. So refresh your memory. And of course, certainly think about, what do you want the interviewer to remember about you? What are the qualities that you're trying to convey? Teamwork or leadership, analytical skills, communication skills, all of these things that you're trying to convey, the key messages. Think through that. Second thing that you can do to prepare is know the school very well. Check out the blogs, school press releases, and keep up to date with what's going on campus. Of course, you can do some background research on your interviewer. I would say there's no need to go beyond their looking at their LinkedIn profile if that is available publicly. I think sometimes it can be, some people do cross the line a little bit when they do too much background research on their interviewer. But knowing, on the surface, what your interviewer does, what industry your interviewer is in, I think that can be helpful as you walk into that interview. And knowing a little bit about who you're talking to, your audience, right? And then, of course, the third thing to do to prepare is to practice a lot. Practice verbalizing your answers out loud. Don't memorize it. Don't read from a script. Don't memorize the script. Just, have key bullet points that you want to convey for each answer, or to each question, and just verbalize it. Tell the story. It can be, you can tell it differently every time. That's okay. They are not expecting you to memorize the script. Use the mirror. Use your MBA mission consultant. Use a friend. And just get used to the sound of your voice saying these answers. I think that's super important, especially for international candidates where perhaps you don't speak English regularly on a day-to-day basis. So it's important to practice speaking. Okay, and of course, time yourself. 30 minutes is going to go fast. Try to think about, keeping your answers succinct. You don't want to go on and have a, 5 or 8 minute, monologue. Most interview answers do fall between 2 to 3 minutes. I think that's usually a good length of time for this to be an interactive conversation and not so much a monologue. Okay, so keep that in mind. Here are some actually some sample examples of what you can expect. So let's say for each story, you might be wondering what kind of questions are they going to ask? Why do I, how do I prepare for each bullet point on my resume? So let's say in this example, you spend 1 weekday a week tutoring inmates for the GED. The GED is the high school exam equivalent in the US. So you might want to think about, okay, some typical questions that they could ask you in regards to that activity on your resume could be, for example, how have you taught those who are junior to you? Describe a role model. How will you contribute to our school? Tell us about a time when you influenced others. Describe a time when you were surprised by feedback that you received. What was the feedback? Why were you surprised? What accomplishment are you most proud of, and why? So actually, I apologize. I had it the other way around. So the story that you could use from your resume that you spend 1 day a week tutoring inmates could be applicable to any number of these questions, right? So you could use the story of, tell me about a time when you influence others. Well, I spend a day a week tutoring inmates at a prison. So, there was a time when, somebody was very reluctant, so those are, those are ways that you could think about, how do I use my story? My different stories. One story can be applicable to different questions. Certainly, you want to try to use only one story one time during each interview so that you're not using the same story to answer multiple questions. That might be a bit of a red flag to the interviewer that perhaps you're not, you don't have enough experience, right? So you want to try to think of, that's why getting to know all of the bullet points in your resume is super important, because now you're walking in with 15, 20 stories under your belt that you could respond to. Okay? So here are some specific sample questions. And these are questions, again, you can find a lot of these questions in our interview guide for Stanford. For a lot of schools that use the blind interview format, these are common questions that they're going to ask. What are your goals after school? What are your long-term goals 10, 20 years out? Why do you want to go to business school now? Why do you want to come to our school, right? What non-academic resources are of interest to you? Tell me about a challenging leadership experience. What did you learn about yourself? What would your coworkers say about you? What do you do for fun? So those are some common blind interview questions that you can expect. Okay. Generally, you can expect some opening questions like, walk me through your resume, tell me about yourself, what should I know about you? So think about 3 to 5 points or sound bites that you could use for the opening. And I would strongly encourage you. I know we said, hey, we don't want to sound too canned, but for the opening type of questions, you definitely want to rehearse that as much as you can. I've been with the firm 8 years. I've done a lot of mock interviews, and I can tell you I have never had anyone sound too canned. And people always worry, I don't want to sound over polished or over rehearsed. And it actually there's a very high limit before you get to that limit of sounding too canned. So definitely practice and make sure that you open with a strong, polished opening of introducing yourself. You know, what are what are the highlights in your resume? Okay. Okay. Now, typically, a lot of my clients would tell me, look, you know, what do I do when they say, walk me through your resume? Do I kind of literally walk them through every bullet point? The answer is no, don't do that. That's not terribly exciting for anyone. Think about structuring your answer. In this is one example I have on the slide about how you could structure your answer. So if you look at the top half and the bottom half of my resume, there are really two driving forces behind my activities, both professional and personal. You know, and those two forces are driving curiosity, a passion for creating results. So that would be one example of having kind of a thematic approach, right? What is the theme of my life? What's the key messages? What drives me? What do I want you to remember about me? Another approach that's actually quite common is you can say at work, this is what I do. And then outside of work, this is what I do. Remember that there are different sections to your resume, right? There's usually a professional section, an education section where you went to university. And then there's also, for a lot of people, there's a extracurricular section. So think about covering those three sections and just picking out highlights. 2 or 3 highlights from each section. And that should, it usually is a very good structure for walk me through your resume, tell me about yourself. Okay, another question that a lot of people can find it difficult to structure is why our school? Why do you want to come to our school? So you want to think about giving 2 or 3 good and thoughtful reasons that connect to your goals specifically. So don't, you know, just give kind of general reasons like, well, you know, Stanford is in the Silicon Valley. It's a very central location, great weather. You know, that's not super specific to you and what your reasons are. So think about what are those reasons that apply to you. So a couple of examples here. One is a do, which is an example that says, I know that starting a business will be challenging and finding my feet while at school will be critical. I would apply to the incubator program so I can launch and refine my concept while in school. So that would be pulling specific resources to connect with what you want to do while you're at Stanford and post MBA, right? So here's a do not. So the do not is a similar reason, but the difference is it's a little bit more vague, right? Your school has a great reputation for entrepreneurship. The network is great. You're ranked into the top 10. So again, that's a little bit more vague. That's not specifically connected to you and your goals. So think about given reasons that are specific to you. Okay. A very difficult question to answer. What other schools are you applying to? A lot of people kind of stumble or they find it a very awkward question to answer. What you want to do is to try to think about what do the schools have in common that I'm applying to? What is the logic behind why you're applying to the schools that you have? So some answers might be, I'm applying to Columbia and then also Wharton and Chicago. So that would be peer school. So the format that or the approach that we suggest here is giving some peer schools, explaining the logic, and then pivoting. Okay, so in your answer, you want to first answer the question by giving them some peer schools that I'm applying to. Peer meaning peer schools to Stanford. You might not want to, if you're, for example, if you're applying to, a school that is, clearly a backup plan or a safety school for you, you may want to leave that out. You may want to just focus on what the peer schools are to Stanford, and then giving them the logic. The logic here would be all 3 schools have an outstanding finance program, critical to joining a hedge fund. And then pivot. The example here, we have Columbia, but certainly for Stanford, you want to have Stanford is my first choice because right? And Stanford is known for having a lot of private equity and VC candidates in the program. So even though it's not known for being a finance program, certainly we actually do send a lot of people into finance. Okay. Now, when it comes to answering the question of what are your goals, some people ask me, how deep do I go? What's the level of detail that they're looking for? So again, we are looking for specifics, and we are looking for the connection to your background. So this is the first example here. This is actually quite specific, quite detailed, and connected to their background. So they talk about, as a banker, I worked on a variety of restructurings, typically with industrial firms. While I worked on the financing side, I was impressed by the management teams that came in and righted the ship, hoping to join a rotational program at an industrial firm like GE or UTC, where I could start my career on a leadership track, etc. And the second answer, which is a little bit more vague and doesn't connect to the background, I want to work at a firm like GE or UTC and ultimately rise through the ranks and become a CEO. It's usually, this answer, the second answer, it's a little general, it's a little vague. You can make it more thoughtful and more specific to your background, and I think those answers are typically what the interviewers are looking for. Okay. Other types of questions could include, tell me about a time when you did this or that. So those are example questions. We use the STAR format, or we recommend the STAR format for that. So STAR stands for, S stands for situation. So the answer here is, the situation was about a year after I started an ABC company. I realized we had grown very fast. The accounting department had tripled in size, which was exciting. But at the same time, we were losing the sense of family that ABC had been known for. So I decided on my own to get it back. The T stands for the task. What's the challenge? What was the task, right? So here, the example is, I thought about different ways to do that and finally hit on starting a department-wide intranet that would let us stay connected while we were at client sites. A would be action. So what did you do, right? So for this person, they said, first I sent out a survey asking what individual boards people would want. Then I worked with IT to create that. Then I organized a launch event, etc. So that's the action that they took. And then the R stands for results. What was the outcome? So today we have 14 separate boards, ranging from recipe exchange to technical advice and so on. Okay. So that would be an example of how you can respond, use the STAR format to respond to the questions about examples. Tell me about a time when you did this or that. What do you do when they ask you about your weakness, right? Talk about a weakness that you have. The format that we suggest is the WISP format. So first the W stands for weakness. You want to acknowledge a real weakness. The second thing you want to do is to describe its impact. So what is the impact of this weakness on you or others around you? S stands for steps. Explain what steps you have taken to improve. And then P stands for proving improvement, right? So you want to demonstrate that you have improved. So that could be one way of answering the weakness question. So this is a quick example. I tend to think and speak quickly, which I think is a plus in many situations, but sometimes it can cause me to interrupt others. So that's a real weakness, right? The impact, because of this, I can come across as dismissive, as though I'm not listening, and junior team members have felt I don't hear or value their ideas. That's a real impact on them and other people around them. S is, I got feedback in my mid-year review, agreed it was accurate. I read up on techniques to remind myself to slow down, wore a rubber band. So what did you do to improve, right? And then P, proving. that you have improved. I'm never going to be perfect, but I know I've gotten better. Some team members have noticed it and told me that it has made me more relatable, trustworthy. So that would be an example of how you can use the WISP approach to discuss a weakness. Okay, so you should have time at the end to ask the interviewer a few questions, so be prepared. Usually the is more of a formality at the end. They want to give you time to ask them anything, but typically they're not expecting you to ask them 20 questions. So certainly, have anywhere between 4 to 6 questions in your back pocket. I think that is usually plenty of questions to ask. And also, of course, it depends on the type of interviewer. Some interviewers may really just, want to check that, hey, do you have any questions for me? Okay, I'm ready to wrap up, right? So if you sense that, then, 1 question or 2 questions should be enough, and thank them politely at the end to say, that's those are all the questions I have right now. Thank you so much for your time. So certainly, you can share your observations or confirmations. For example, the example that we have on our slide here, something that struck me every time I visited is that the faculty are really close to the students. Has that been your experience too? So you can ask kind of a confirmation question, and that can hopefully draw them to share with you their experiences. Or you can ask a specific question that is specific or relevant to you. Right, so you could ask, oh, Dean so-and-so has been in place for a year now. How has his impact been felt? So those are some types of questions that you can ask at the end, okay? Take your time, take a sip of water, ask for a minute to collect your thoughts. If you're truly stumped during, there's a question that you really cannot answer, you could certainly politely ask to move on, to say, I haven't really thought about that question. Can I loop back to you at the end, and maybe that'll give me a bit of time to think about it. So you can certainly do that. There is no right or wrong answer to interviews. You just need to respond intelligently, thoughtfully, and thoroughly to the question being asked. It's okay to say you haven't thought about the answer, or you don't. For example, sometimes they'll ask, have you ever encountered an ethical situation? And for a lot of us, perhaps we haven't. And it's okay to say, I really haven't encountered that situation. But let me come back to that question at the end of the interview, and see if I can think of something. So certainly you can do that. Okay. I actually have to excuse myself for like 2 seconds. I forgot to plug in my computer, so my batteries get running low. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So now some people do ask me, after the interview, should I ask for feedback? I mean, I emailed my interviewer. They were very nice. They responded to me. Do I ask for feedback as to how I did? Typically, I would say no, because keep in mind again that the interview is one data point. So even if your interviewer thought very highly of you, the school, ultimately admissions committee, may make a different decision. So I would say don't put your interviewer in a difficult position. What should I wear? I think that business casual is typically fine. Go with what you feel most comfortable. If you're most comfortable wearing a suit and tie, or for women, a suit, that's absolutely fine. If you're more comfortable, going without a suit, that's fine too. But go with what you feel most comfortable. And I would usually say business casual is probably the most casual that I would go personally, but certainly go with something that you feel most comfortable. Okay, my interview is at Starbucks. Who should pay? Typically, the interviewer will pay, but certainly, if you feel comfortable, you can offer to pay. typically, the interviewer will pay for it and expense it back to the school. Send a timely and personal thank you note. I think within 1 or 2 days. Email should be fine. Some schools will say, this is our just email the admissions office with your thank you note. But certainly, if the interviewer gives you their personal business card, you can feel free to send them a direct thank you note. Okay, so quick blurb about our company, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. We are one of the oldest firms in the industry. We are named #1 by Poets and Quants and highest rated on the GMAT Club with a lot of verified reviews. So please feel free to check us out on these websites. We have a lot of resources for you. I've mentioned some already, but I want to draw your attention to the free 30-minute consultation that you can schedule with any one of us on the team, and we will review your resume beforehand, and you can ask us very personal questions and tailored questions to your profile. So take advantage of that. And then you can find a lot of details about the services that we offer on our website as well. Here's a sampling of some of our team members. If you click on each person's name, you get to a detailed bio as well as a short video of each person. So do take a look at who you might want to speak with. On that note, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I know you're all very interested to get your questions answered, so I will work my way down from the top. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments section. Okay, Vinyayak says, what if I have not had promotions in my 5 years of work experience, although I have upskilled and worked through a variety of roles within my title, would that hurt my chances? That's a very good question. I have worked with a lot of candidates over the years, especially in big organizations where promotions are difficult to come by. It might be, once every 3 years, once every 5 years. So the schools are not specifically just looking for promotions, but they're looking for, have you been doing well? Have you been taking on more and more responsibilities? Are you getting taking on larger projects, perhaps? So you want to show that you're on a positive career trajectory, and that's what they are looking for. They prefer to see somebody who is a top performer, doing well, progressing in their career. And I see a follow-up from Vinyayak saying that you have the managing responsibilities of a product manager. So that's fantastic. So definitely put that as a bullet point in your resume. And certainly during the interview, when they ask you about your role, your responsibilities, you want to make that clear as well. Okay. Ram asks, tech startup or entrepreneur is more likable compared to conventional or non-tech entrepreneur. What's your opinion? It's not immediately clear to me what you're asking. Are you asking how you should frame your goals or how you should frame your current background? So I'll table that question for now. Feel free to clarify in a later comment, Ram, and we'll come back to you. Okay. Aku says, any type of certificate course add value to our profile? Certainly. I think if you have taken courses where you are improving your skills, that can certainly add value. You can include that on your resume, and if the relevant question comes up in the interview, you can talk about that as well. Ram asks, any comment on why our school for 9 years of entrepreneur? So I assume you're saying you have 9 years of entrepreneurship program. How do you answer the question of why are you applying to our school, or why do you want to get an MBA? I think that's definitely with 9 years of full-time, I'm going to assume it's full-time startup experience. You are more experienced than the typical applicant to the GSB program, most people have anywhere between 3 to 6 years of full-time work experience when they apply. So if you have a longer tenure than that, regardless of whether you have been in the startup world or whether you've been working as a product manager, the question that they ask and that you do need to explain is why MBA and why now? So you want to be very specific in terms of connecting the skill set and the knowledge that you're going to learn at business school to your future career goals. Explain why you cannot learn those skills on the job, and really look at specific resources and programs that they have that will help you get to your future career goals. So that's what they're looking for. All right, in terms of for older candidates. Okay, we have another question, Shikhar, on goals. Do we need to put emphasis on short-term as well as long-term goals? Good question. Now, if the interviewer just asks you, what are your goals after business school, and they keep it quite general, you can certainly talk about your immediate post-MBA goals, which is the job that you want right after you graduate from school, as well as the long-term goals. Long-term would be, 10, 20 years down the road. Usually, the story makes a lot more sense if you talk about your immediate goals and how it links to your long-term goals, so that you're kind of giving them the whole picture and they're not missing any specific part, right? With a question from Osama. Hey, Osama. Osama and I actually, talked a little while ago, and that's why I would certainly encourage you guys to sign up for our free consultation, because it's very helpful to have somebody take a look at your resume and your profile specifically and answer your tailored questions. Okay, Osama, some say that the GSB prefers a certain type of applicants, i.e. entrepreneurs. To what extent is that true? Does that put non-entrepreneur guys at the back foot? Good question, and the answer is no. There is a huge diversity in not only the incoming class, but also the applicant pool. And Stanford, actually, perhaps not so much now, but a couple of years ago, it was definitely a little conscious of being known for being just an entrepreneur school. And so it was actually actively trying to get the message out that, no, we're not just an entrepreneur school and not just for entrepreneurs. We have a lot of students who are interested in finance, consulting, healthcare, technology, so a lot of industries are represented in the applicant pool as well as the incoming class. If you look at their employment reports, you will see kind of usually a breakdown of where the graduates go to, what industries they go to. And I believe the last number I heard was maybe, I forget when this was in the presentation I did last week, so I should remember, but it was only a certain percentage of graduates actually go into starting their own venture, being an entrepreneur. But also keep in mind that a lot of graduates do go into or do come from as well smaller companies. So maybe not starting their own company, but certainly younger companies. But there are also a huge representation of folks who come from large established companies. Ultimately, when you come from a large established company, you have the proof that it was a very selective process, because a lot of people want to work at these large companies. So the fact that you got a job there, that's a selective process. They have a good training program, most likely, and also the standard is consistent, right? There's a certain level of work performance that these big companies are expecting from you. So actually, I work with clients from both startup and big companies, and typically the startup applicants are worried, how do I prove that I'm working at a reputable company? The standards are high, that I am a top performer and truly am a top performer compared to folks coming from a large company. So to answer your question, no disadvantage at all coming in as a non-entrepreneur. Okay. Next question, Shabam, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Do they consider a gap of 3 years after graduating college and starting job, having more than 6 years experience in banking? Okay, so I assume you're asking after you graduated university, you had a gap of 3 years before you started your job. Certainly that is a significant gap that they would want to know what were you doing during that time. What was the reason for this gap? And I've definitely worked with candidates who have had to take time off of work because of family reasons or health reasons, and there is no penalty for that. They just want to know what happened, what's been going on. So feel free to explain that in the optional essay to give your side of the story and let them know what happened. So the fact that after the gap, you have more than 6 years of experience in banking, that is terrific. And still, all the criteria that we talked about would apply as well. They want to see that you're a top performer, taking on increasing responsibilities. Okay, great. Ashi, will 2 years of work experience be adequate for being an ideal candidate? I think that that would be a little bit challenging, given that you are competing against folks that have more work experience, and the benefit of having more work experience is they've had more time to lead bigger projects, take on more responsibilities, show leadership. So that being said, now if within these 2 years of your work experience, you are in the US, we have a phrase called "you're punching above your weight." That means that you are performing at a higher level than your cohorts who have 2 years of work experience. You're performing as well as, say, someone with 3, 4 years of work experience. Early promotions, responsibilities typically given to folks who are older and more experienced. Then certainly, if you can make that case, if you have that track record, I think Stanford would be very interested in your profile. Definitely, Stanford as a school, they're not looking at just the number of years of work experience. They're looking at what you've actually done, your achievements, what your role was. So I think they do appreciate that someone is a top performer and performing, much faster or at a level that's much faster than their cohort. So actually, I would encourage you to definitely take a very candid look at your experience, skill set, or feel free to sign up for a free consultation, and we can have a candid chat about your experience and whether it will be strong enough to apply. Okay, Carolyn. How well regarded is work experience in a small foreign country? Is U.S. experience preferred? Good question. I don't think that they prefer U.S. experience versus other countries' experience. I think, again, they're looking at what your achievement was, what was your role, what was your impact. And a lot of times, I think that in being in for example, working in a smaller country gives you an opportunity to take on perhaps different roles or have more of an impact. So I think that is really the key in showing that. So your experience will be weighted certainly equally to any other country. Okay. Sapna, having no volunteering experience and social impact on your resume, does that put a candidate at the back foot? And in addition, if the applicant has not been active in any creative roles. So not having any volunteering experience or creative experience is not a disadvantage for your application. Certainly, I think you would be missing an opportunity to showcase leadership experiences and also share kind of a different side of you. We all, we all do different things on weekends or outside of work, right? So I think that a lot of people use volunteering as an opportunity to show, hey, this is what I'm interested in outside of work. This is what I do in my free time. And I think, if it's not volunteering experience, if you can show or, describe to them what you're passionate about, what you do outside of work, I think that would be equally fine as well. So for example, I've worked with clients in the past that have been super passionate about, whether it's outdoors, adventures, triathlons or photography. And that's what they spend their weekends doing, training for triathlons or, being involved with their church or mosque or temples, So all of these things count as well in making you an interesting person. Again, they're not looking for right or wrong activities to get involved with. They're looking at, they're really looking to get to know you, and they're looking for somebody who's engaged with their community, and somebody who's interesting, leader, passionate about whatever it is that they are involved with. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I have another question from Ashi. Will making a bigger impact in one sector be preferable, or would having a number of small impacts in a number of sectors be preferred? That's a good question, and I think that's a really hard question to answer. I don't think that, again, there's a right or wrong way to do it here. I think it really depends on how deep you like to go personally. I know some people who like to get involved with a lot of different causes or different organizations, and perhaps they're spending an hour a week or a couple hours a month at each organization, and they're still able to feel satisfied. They're still able to make an impact that way. And then there are other people who perhaps they like to go really deep in their involvement with a single organization, like they want to, plan a gala event or, lead up the committee, etc. So, and they might be spending most, if not all, of their outside time with that organization. So I have seen it work both ways. I've seen applicants with both type of background be successful. So I don't think that they have any preference. Again, they just want to get to know you. If you have involvement with a lot of different organizations and activities, then they will want to know what drives that. How did you choose these different organizations? How do you prioritize? On the other hand, if you are really going deep into one organization, again, they would also want to know why. Why are you so passionate about this one activity? So as long as you're able to make an impact and explain what drives you to get involved in that one activity or a number of activities, I think that would work. Okay. Ashi has a follow-up question. Does freelancing count as work experience? Certainly, if you are paid for that work, then it should count as a work experience as well. Okay, Aksha has a question. I am not very assertive because I am afraid I might come out rude and spoil relationships. How do I highlight this point in my resume to improve on the skill? That's actually a good point. Now, I don't think that the resume is really to highlight weaknesses. I think certainly during the interview, they could ask you directly about your weakness. So please go back to this video recording. I think I have a specific slide on what could be an approach to talk about your weakness. An example as well. So actually, if you don't mind, just click on our recording after this live stream, and you can look at that slide in more detail. Okay. So at this point, we should start to wrap up. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today and asking questions, really good, insightful questions, and thinking about how you might get prepare yourself when you get to that interview stage. A lot of the tips and approaches that we talked about are also applicable to other schools as well. So hopefully this can be helpful to you. And again, look back on our past week's recordings as well for more information on the Stanford application and the program, what they're looking for. You know, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Sign up for a free consultation and really get your profile looked at in more detail, okay? So thank you again, everybody, and really appreciate your joining us today. Have a great rest of the week. Bye now.